You still love them. And that is the most painful part of all of this, is it not? Because if you did not love them, if you had stopped caring somewhere along the way, this would all be so much simpler. You could just walk away. You could just close the door and move forward. But you do love them. And every single time you think about them, every time their name crosses your mind, or you hear a song that sounds like something you shared together, your chest does this thing, this tightening, this hollow, aching pressure right in the center of your chest, and you do not even fully understand why it keeps happening. You do not understand why something that is supposed to be beautiful keeps leaving you feeling this empty. And that is exactly why you are here today. Because somewhere inside you, you already know that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. And you have been avoiding that knowledge for too long. Before I go any further, I want you to do something for me. I want you to comment below this message the words, "I love Allah." Not because it is just something to type, but because right now, in this moment, making that declaration is an act of anchoring yourself to the only love that has never failed you, never disappointed you, never made your chest feel heavy when you thought about it. The love of Allah is the one love that asks nothing of your self-worth in return. So type it, mean it, and then stay with me, because what I am about to share with you in the next hour has the power to completely shift the way you have been seeing your life, your heart, and your pain. Most people who watch something like this leave before the end. Do not be that person today. The last part of this message especially, I promise you, will change something inside you permanently. So stay. Now let me ask you something honestly, and I want you to really sit with the question rather than rushing to answer it. If love is supposed to be one of the most beautiful things a human being can experience, why does the love you have been giving so freely feel like the heaviest burden you have ever carried? Why does it feel like you are always the one waiting, always the one reaching, always the one who cares just a little bit more? Why do you go to bed at night running conversations through your mind, picking apart every word they said, every word they did not say, every moment they looked at you with warmth, and every moment they looked straight through you? If this is love, if this is really what all the songs and the stories and the movies have been talking about all your life, then why does it feel so much more like slow and quiet suffering than anything else? The truth, and I say this to you with full gentleness because I know how much this hurts. The truth is that what you have been experiencing is not love in its full and proper sense. What you have been experiencing is attachment, trauma, longing, fear, and the desperate human need to be chosen by someone who has not fully chosen you. And the gap between those two things, between what you have and what love is actually supposed to be, that gap is where all your pain lives. That is where all the overthinking happens. That is where you lie awake at 3 in the morning. That is where you keep rehearsing conversations that never lead anywhere different. And today, I want us to walk through that gap together. I want to help you see what is actually happening inside you, why it is happening, what Allah is trying to tell you through this experience, and most importantly, how you begin to find your way back to yourself and back to Him. Here is something that I want to say to you very directly, because I think you are someone who needs to hear the truth spoken plainly rather than dressed up in comfortable language. You already know something is not right. You have known for a while now, maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe even longer than that. You have seen the signs. You have felt the inconsistency. Those moments where they are warm and present and everything feels possible, followed by days of silence or coldness that leave you questioning everything you thought you understood. You have noticed the way their effort comes in waves and then recedes entirely, and how in those periods of recession, you find yourself working twice as hard to fill the space. You have felt the disrespect, not always the loud, obvious kind, but the quiet kind. The kind where your feelings are minimized. The kind where what matters to you is treated as inconvenient, the kind where you speak and somehow still feel like you were not truly heard. And yet, despite all of this, you have continued to find reasons. You have become extraordinarily creative in the art of justification. They are just busy. They are going through something difficult. They show love differently than I do. They do care. They just struggle to express it. They will change when the timing is right. I know them in a way others do not. And there is something real here. I can feel it. I want you to hear what I am about to say with real care and without defensiveness. Because I am not trying to diminish your experience or tell you that what you felt was not genuine. What I am saying is this: the same mind that loves them has been actively working against your own clarity. The same heart that is attached to them has been convincing your intellect to ignore what your instincts already know. You are not confused. You are not lacking in intelligence. You are not incapable of seeing clearly. You are avoiding the truth. Because the truth, once you fully accept it, requires you to change. And change, even when it leads to healing, is terrifying. Stay with me here, because this part matters enormously. There is a profound difference between not knowing the truth and not being ready to accept it. And most people who are hurting in relationships like this, one, are not in the first category. They are in the second. They have seen the red flags. They have felt the coldness. They have had the conversations that end in circles, where nothing ever actually changes and the same patterns just repeat themselves in slightly different clothing. And they keep going back, not because they cannot see what is happening, but because accepting what is happening means accepting a loss that feels too large to carry. It means accepting that the future they imagined with this person may not be real. It means accepting that the connection they believed was unique may have been more one-sided than they were willing to admit. And the mind, in its mercy, protects us from pain by keeping us in a state of managed hope. A hope that is just substantial enough to stop us from walking away, but never quite solid enough to give us real peace. That managed hope is not your friend. It feels like it is keeping you going, but what it is actually doing is keeping you in place. It is keeping you rooted in a situation that is slowly, day by day, draining something essential from you. And Allah, the one who sees what we cannot see, who knows what we do not know, who is closer to us than our own jugular vein, as His own words tell us, Allah is watching this happen. And He is not indifferent to your pain. He never has been. But He also cannot force you to choose yourself. He gave you free will, and with it, the capacity to hold on long past the point where wisdom would have told you to release. And so part of what this message is about at its deepest level is helping you understand that seeing clearly is not a betrayal of the person you love. It is an act of faithfulness to yourself and to the wisdom Allah has placed inside you. I need you to understand something that perhaps nobody has said to you clearly enough before. Love, real love, the kind that is spiritually aligned and emotionally healthy and built on a foundation of genuine care. Love is not supposed to feel like this. It is not supposed to be a source of constant anxiety. It is not supposed to keep you guessing. It is not supposed to make you feel like you are always one wrong word away from losing everything. Real love does not produce that particular kind of exhaustion that comes from perpetual uncertainty. Real love is not something you have to earn back again and again. Real love does not leave you lying awake at night, wondering whether you are enough. The Prophet, peace be upon him, described the relationship between a husband and wife as one of tranquility. The word used in the original text is a word that means stillness, peace, the settling of something restless, a harbor. The image is of a soul that was turbulent, finding its place of rest. That is what a love that is aligned with Allah is supposed to feel like. Not drama, not the addictive push and pull of someone who gives you just enough to keep you close, but never quite enough to make you feel truly secure. Not the constant performance of proving yourself worthy. Tranquility, safety, the freedom to simply exist in someone's presence without calculating every word, without monitoring every shift in their mood, without spending your emotional energy on the relentless work of keeping them interested. Now I want you to sit with this. Really sit with it. Think about the relationship you are in or the person you cannot seem to let go of, and ask yourself honestly, does this feel like tranquility? Does it feel like a harbor, or does it feel like you are constantly at sea trying to read the weather, trying to navigate towards something solid that keeps moving just beyond your reach? Because the answer to that question is telling you something important. The answer to that question is showing you a gap between what Allah has described as the nature of true love and what you are currently experiencing. And that gap is not something to dismiss. That gap is not something to paper over with hope and effort and patience alone. That gap is a message, and it is time to start reading it. There is a line I want you to hold in your heart for the rest of this message. It is simple, but it is one of the most important things I will say to you today. If it consistently takes your peace away, it is not from Allah. I am not saying that love is without difficulty. I am not saying that healthy relationships never go through hardship or misunderstanding or seasons of distance. All relationships require work, patience, communication, and grace. But there is a categorical difference between the natural friction of two people learning each other and growing together, and the chronic anxiety of someone who has made their emotional well-being entirely dependent on a person who is not showing up fully. One is growth, the other is harm. And what Allah intends for you is not harm. What He intends for you is a love that honors the soul He created you with. Now I want to talk about something that I think will help you understand yourself much more compassionately. Because one of the things that adds to the pain of situations like this is the confusion of not understanding your own behavior. You know, on some level that this is hurting you. You know, somewhere in the back of your mind that this is not what you deserve. And yet you cannot seem to leave. You cannot seem to stop caring. You cannot seem to stop checking their profile or reaching out or holding on to the memories or finding reasons to stay connected. And then you judge yourself for it. You tell yourself that you are weak. You tell yourself that you should be stronger than this. You tell yourself that you must be foolish to keep choosing something that keeps hurting you. And that self-judgment makes everything worse, because now on top of the pain of the relationship, you are carrying the additional weight of shame about your own response to it. So let me explain to you what is actually happening, because understanding it will begin to dissolve that shame. What you are experiencing, the inability to simply walk away from something that is clearly causing you harm, is not a character flaw. It is a very specific, very well documented psychological reality. When a person receives affection and care intermittently, meaning sometimes they are warm and present and wonderful, and other times they are cold or distant or unavailable, the brain responds to this pattern in a way that is almost identical to how it responds to other powerful forms of conditioning. The uncertain reward is more compelling than the certain one. When you do not know whether today will be a day when they are present and loving, the moments when they feel disproportionately significant, they flood your system with relief and connection and warmth. And then when those moments disappear again, the contrast is so sharp that you find yourself doing almost anything to get back to them. This is not weakness. This is biology. This is the way the human mind responds to unpredictability in relationships. And the person providing that intermittent warmth, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether intentionally or simply through their own inconsistency, that person has an enormous amount of power over you. Not because of who they are, not because of any special quality they possess that nobody else ever will, but because of the pattern they have established. And here is the painful heart of it, the thing I need you to really hear. You are not in love with who they are. You are in love with the version of them that exists in those moments of warmth. You are in love with the person you experience them being when they are at their best, their most present, their most connected. And you are holding on to the hope that that version of them will become the consistent version, that one day the warmth will just stay, that one day the distance will stop, that one day they will wake up and fully, consistently choose you. And I say this to you with the deepest compassion I am capable of. You are not in love with who they are. You are in love with who you hope they will become. And those are two very different people. One is real, with limitations and patterns that have been showing themselves to you clearly. The other is a projection, a wish, a possibility that you have been watering with your own love and your own sacrifice and your own patience, hoping it will eventually grow into something real. And the tragedy is that the more you give to that projection, the more you lose sight of the actual person in front of you. The more you exhaust yourself trying to call forth a version of them that may never consistently arrive. I want to talk about something that most people in this kind of situation do not fully register until much later, often years later, when they look back and finally understand what was happening to them beneath the surface. And that is the damage, the slow, cumulative, invisible damage that this kind of attachment does to a person over time. Because from the outside, and often from your own perspective in the thick of it, you are just someone who loves someone. You are just someone going through a difficult patch. You are just someone who is struggling a little, but managing. But underneath that surface, something more serious is happening. And I want you to see it clearly, so that the seeing of it can begin to change something in you. The first thing that happens when you spend an extended period of time in an emotionally unreciprocated or inconsistent attachment is that your baseline sense of your own worth begins to shift. It happens so gradually that you barely notice it. But over time, you start to measure your value through the lens of whether or not this one person is showing up for you. When they are warm, you feel good about yourself. When they are distant, you feel somehow less. Your self-esteem, which should be rooted in something far more stable and far more sacred than any human being's fluctuating attention, becomes tied to their behavior. And this is deeply, profoundly dangerous, because now you are giving one person the power to determine how you feel about yourself on a daily basis. And if that person is inconsistent, if that person is emotionally unavailable, if that person is not fully invested, then your sense of your own worth becomes a constantly moving target that you can never quite reach. And then something else happens, something even more subtle and even more damaging. You start to shrink. You start to make yourself smaller so that they can be more comfortable. You start editing your own needs, your own desires, your own reactions, because somewhere along the way you learned that expressing them in full led to distance or conflict, or the particular terrible silence that hurts more than any argument. You stop saying certain things. You stop asking for certain things. You start performing a version of yourself that you believe is more acceptable to them, more manageable, less demanding. And in doing all of this, you lose contact with who you actually are. You lose contact with your own voice. You lose contact with the part of you that knew before all of this began exactly what you deserved and exactly what kind of love felt right. I want you to think about who you were before this person entered your life with this level of intensity. Think about how you moved through the world, how you spoke to people, how confident you were in your own opinions, your own desires, your own boundaries. Think about how little time you used to spend worrying about whether you were enough, or whether you were asking for too much, or whether the love you were receiving was real. And now think about where you are today. Are you more of yourself than you were then? or less? Are you more confident or less? Are you more at peace or less? Because love, true love, is supposed to cause you to expand. It is supposed to cause you to grow into more of who Allah created you to be, not less. If something is consistently causing you to become less, to shrink, to doubt, to diminish, then by definition it cannot be from Allah. There is a moment in every story like this, a specific point in time where the shift happened, where you crossed from being someone who was choosing this connection with their whole self intact to being someone who had begun to subordinate themselves to it. And most people, when they look back, can identify that moment even if they cannot name it precisely. It was the first time you apologized for something that was not your fault, not because you genuinely felt you were wrong, but because the silence was too heavy to bear. Or it was the first time you saw something that troubled you and made the choice not to mention it because you were afraid of how they would react. Or it was the first time you altered your own plans, your own time, your own energy to accommodate their inconsistency, to be available when they finally decided to show up. Each of those moments was a tiny surrender. And surrenders, when they are not met with reciprocity and care, accumulate into something serious. Because here is what nobody tells you about loving someone who is not fully available to love you back. The love does not stay contained to them. It bleeds. It bleeds into the way you see yourself. It bleeds into the standards you apply to how others treat you. It bleeds into your relationship with Allah. Because when you are pouring everything you have into a human being and receiving pain in return, it can begin to feel as though this is simply what you deserve. As though this level of effort for so little return is simply what love requires. And that belief, that quiet, deeply embedded belief that love must be painful, that love must be earned, that love must require you to constantly prove your worth, that belief will follow you out of this relationship and into everyone that comes after it, unless you deliberately, consciously, with intention and with the help of Allah, address it and heal it. There is a verse I want to bring into this space, and I want you to feel it rather than just hear it. Allah says that He does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because so often when we are suffering, we are looking outward. We are looking at what they need to change. We are looking at what the situation needs to change. We are calculating how things might be different if only this one variable shifted. But the word of Allah is pointing in a different direction entirely. It is pointing inward. The transformation, the real transformation, does not begin out there. It begins inside you. It begins in the moment you decide that what is within you matters. That the condition of your heart, your soul, your self-worth, your relationship with Allah, these things are worth changing for. These things are worth protecting. And I want to be honest with you about something that is perhaps uncomfortable to hear. Part of what keeps people in painful situations is not just love and not just fear. It is also pride. There is something in us that does not want to admit that we were wrong, that does not want to accept that we gave so much to something that was not giving back proportionally, that does not want to face the people in our lives who perhaps warned us, who perhaps saw things more clearly from the outside and admit that they were right. And so we stay partly to preserve the narrative that this is something worth staying for, partly because leaving would mean acknowledging the loss, and the loss feels too big. I understand this. I understand it completely. And I want you to hear that choosing yourself, choosing clarity, choosing healing does not mean you were foolish for caring. It means you are now wise enough to see what caring has cost you and brave enough to stop paying that price. Now I want to go somewhere deeper with you, because everything I have shared so far has been preparing you for this part. And this is the part that I hope with Allah's mercy will shift something fundamental in the way you understand your situation. We have been talking about love from a human, emotional, psychological perspective, but now I want to bring in the perspective that matters most. The perspective of the one who created the human heart, who wired it for connection, who placed love within us as a profound trust and a profound responsibility. The perspective of Allah. Allah did not create you to be emptied by love. He did not create you to be diminished by it, destroyed by it, or defined by it. He created you in a form of profound dignity. The word used in the Quran to describe how Allah honored the children of Adam is a word that means He elevated them. He gave them a nobility inherent to their existence. You were born with worth, not earned worth, not conditional worth, not worth that depends on whether a specific person decides to see you clearly on any given day. Inherent, God-given, irrevocable worth. And any relationship that consistently makes you feel as though your worth is in question is contradicting something that Allah Himself has established about you. It is contradicting your design. I want to be careful here because I do not want to reduce this message to a simple condemnation of love between human beings. Love between human beings, when it is pursued in the way Allah has guided, is one of the greatest of His blessings. It is a mercy from Him. It is a source of comfort and support and deep joy. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that he was made to love women, and that among the beautiful things of this world, his greatest delight was in prayer. In that pairing, there is wisdom. Human love and divine connection placed together, each one enriching the other. The love of a spouse who brings you closer to Allah, who reminds you of Him through their kindness, who sees your best self and calls it forward. This is among the greatest gifts a person can receive in this life. This is love in alignment with its purpose. But when love pulls you away from Allah, when attachment becomes a form of idol worship in which the approval and presence of one human being holds more weight in your heart than your connection to your Creator, then that love has crossed a boundary that is deeply spiritually significant. When the thought of losing them fills you with more dread than the thought of losing your closeness to Allah, something has become disordered in your heart. And Allah, in His wisdom, often uses the withdrawal of what we have displaced Him with to call us back to Him. He removes the thing that was occupying too much space so that the space can be filled properly this time with Him. And when you are in the middle of that process, it does not feel like mercy. It feels like loss. It feels like pain. It feels like punishment. But it is not punishment, it is redirection. It is Allah saying through the language of your circumstances, come back to me. I am where your peace actually lives. I want to say something that might sound hard, but comes from a place of complete care. If this love is breaking you, if it is stealing your sleep, your peace, your sense of self-worth, your capacity for joy, if it is pulling you further from Allah rather than closer to Him, then it is not meant for you. Not because you are not lovable, not because you do not deserve love, not because Allah is withholding from you, but because what is truly meant for you cannot destroy you on the way to reaching you. What Allah has written for you will not require you to demolish yourself to receive it. What is truly yours will not arrive by taking everything from you first. I know that everything I am saying makes sense on one level and feels completely impossible on another. Because knowing something intellectually and being able to live it emotionally are two entirely different experiences. And I think it is important to name that. Because one of the things that can make spiritual guidance feel frustrating is when it presents truth without acknowledging the gap between the truth and the living of it. I am not going to stand here and tell you that letting go is easy. It is not. For some people, it is one of the most difficult things they will ever do. And I want you to understand why it is so difficult. Because that understanding is part of what will help you do it. The fear of being alone is one of the most primal human fears in existence. It is not a shallow fear. It is not vanity. It is not neediness. It is rooted in the deepest architecture of what we are as human beings. Creatures designed for connection, wired for belonging, constructed in such a way that isolation genuinely harms us. And so when the prospect of losing someone arises, even someone who is not fully showing up for you, even someone whose presence comes with a cost, the nervous system responds with something that can feel very much like survival fear. The thought of their absence feels like the thought of falling. And so you hold on, not entirely because of them, but because the holding feels like the only thing standing between you and a drop you cannot see the bottom of. But here is what I want you to hear very carefully, because this is one of the most important things I will say in this entire message. You are not afraid of losing them. You are afraid of being alone with yourself without them. And those are profoundly different fears, because one of them is about them and the other is about you. When you strip away the noise of the relationship, when you remove the distraction of focusing on them and what they are or are not doing, what you are left with is yourself, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own questions about who you are and what you are worth and what your life means. And for many people, the relationship, even a painful one, has been functioning as a way to avoid that confrontation with themselves. As long as you are focused outward on them, on the hope of them, on the grief of them, you do not have to look inward. And the inward look is what you are truly afraid of. I want you to know that Allah is in that inward look. He is waiting for you there, in the stillness that you have been filling with distraction and attachment, in the silence you have been afraid to sit in the space that the absence of this person would create. Allah is already present. He has always been there. He has been waiting for you to look in that direction. And the moment you turn toward Him, instead of toward the relationship as your source of peace, something begins to shift. It does not shift all at once. It does not resolve in a single prayer or a single moment of intention. But it begins. And that beginning, however small, is the most significant movement you can make. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told us that Allah says, and I translate this for you from the sacred text, if my servant draws close to me by a hand's span, I draw close to them by an arm's length. If they draw close to me walking, I come to them running. Think about that. Think about the proportionality of it. Your small movement toward Him is met by His movement toward you, and His movement is incomparably larger. You do not have to have it all figured out. You do not have to be fully healed before you turn back to Him. You do not have to have let go completely before you start praying again. You turn toward Him, imperfect and broken and confused and grieving, and He runs to meet you. That is the God you are dealing with. That is the love that has never abandoned you. I want to speak to you now very directly, and I want you to hear me not as a judge and not as someone who does not understand the complexity of what you are feeling, but as someone who cares enough to say what needs to be said. The truth you have been running from is simply this: they are not choosing you, not in the full, consistent, wholehearted way that you have been choosing them. They are not valuing what you bring to their life in proportion to how you value what they bring to yours. They are not making the effort that the depth of your feeling deserves in return. And I know that you know this. I know that somewhere in the quiet moments, in the honest corners of your own mind, you have seen this clearly. And then you have quickly found something to soften it, some memory or some hopeful interpretation or some part of you that insists you are being unfair to them. But I want to sit in that truth with you for a moment, without the softening, without the qualifications, just the plain reality of it. If they wanted to treat you the way you deserve to be treated, they would. That is the thing about love and effort and care. They do not require perfect circumstances. They do not require someone to have no flaws or no difficulties or no complicated history. They require a decision, a choice. And every day that passes in which the pattern remains the same, every day in which the distance is maintained and the effort is unequal and your needs go consistently unmet, is a day in which that choice is being made. Not necessarily with cruelty or deliberate intention, but a choice nonetheless. And you deserve to see it as a choice. Because seeing it as a choice gives you the information you need to make your own. Imagine this with me for a moment. Imagine someone sitting across from you, and that someone is a dear friend, someone whose life you care about deeply, and they are telling you exactly what you are living. The waiting, the justifying, the shrinking, the overthinking, the fear, the inconsistency, the love that costs them so much but returns so little. What would you say to that friend? What would you feel for them? Would you tell them to hold on longer? Would you tell them that they simply need to be more patient, to try harder, to find better ways to communicate their need? Or would you look at them with love and say, you deserve more than this. You have given enough. It is time to give some of that love back to yourself. Whatever you would say to that friend, say it to yourself today, because you deserve your own compassion. You deserve your own advocacy. You deserve someone in your corner who will not watch you suffer without saying something. And today, that someone is you. Pause here for a moment. Just breathe. I know this part of the message is heavy. I know it is stirring things up. That stirring is not comfortable, but it is necessary, because nothing changes while we are still numb to it. And the discomfort you are feeling right now, that tightening in your chest, that prickling behind your eyes, that something in you that both wants to keep reading and wants to close this and go back to the familiar, that is the feeling of something beginning to shift. Do not run from it. Sit in it. Let Allah work through it. I want to talk to you now about something that may feel unfamiliar, perhaps even slightly uncomfortable, and that is the act of choosing yourself. Not selfishness, not indifference, not the cold withdrawal of someone who stops caring. The conscious, deliberate, spiritually grounded act of deciding that your well-being matters, that your peace is worth protecting, that your soul, which Allah breathed into you and which He will ask about on the day when nothing can be hidden, deserves to be treated with dignity, including by you. Because here is something that I think is important to acknowledge. One of the reasons we sometimes struggle to choose ourselves is that somewhere along the way we learned that choosing ourselves was a form of selfishness. We were taught, directly or indirectly, that love means sacrifice, that care means self-erasure, that being a good person means placing everyone else's needs consistently above your own. And there is truth in the value of generosity and sacrifice and care for others. These are deeply honored in Islam. But there is also truth in the fact that you cannot give from a place of emptiness. You cannot pour from a vessel that has been drained. When you neglect your own heart, your own spiritual health, your own sense of worth and dignity, you do not become a better servant to those around you. You become a depleted, resentful, diminished version of who you are meant to be. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told his companions to begin with themselves. Begin with yourself. Give yourself what you need so that you have something real to give to others. There is wisdom in this that extends far beyond the surface. It is telling us that the self is not the enemy of generosity. The nourished self is the source of it. And when I talk about choosing yourself, this is what I mean. Choosing to nourish yourself. Choosing to be honest with yourself. Choosing to protect your heart, not because your heart is more important than others, but because your heart is the instrument through which you love Allah and through which you serve His creation. And an instrument that is broken cannot serve its purpose. I want to tell you something that I believe with my whole heart. The moment you choose yourself, genuinely, not as a performance and not out of spite, but as a real and sincere decision rooted in self-respect and in the recognition of your own worth before Allah, the moment that happens, something changes. Not immediately in your external circumstances. The person you love does not suddenly transform. The situation does not magically resolve. But something changes inside you. A kind of clarity arrives, a settling, as if some part of you that has been holding its breath for a very long time is finally, carefully allowed to exhale. Because for the first time in however long this has been going on, you are no longer waiting for someone else to tell you that you are enough. You are telling yourself. And the divine confirmation of that is already written in you, in the soul Allah breathed into you, in the dignity He assigned to you before you ever drew your first breath. You do not need closure from them. I want to say that again because I think it is one of the most liberating truths I can offer you. You do not need them to acknowledge what happened. You do not need them to apologize, to explain themselves, to validate your experience, to give you the conversation that ties everything up neatly. You need clarity within yourself. You need the internal shift that comes from deciding on your own terms that you are going to begin treating yourself the way you have been waiting for someone else to treat you, with gentleness, with consistency, with patience, with belief. You can give yourself those things. And Allah can give you those things in ways that no human being ever could. I want to talk about what healing actually looks like, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about this. People often imagine healing as a destination, a place you get to after a certain amount of time has passed, where the pain is gone entirely and you feel completely restored and everything makes sense. And while something like that may eventually be the reality, the actual experience of healing is much less linear and much more alive than that image suggests. Healing is not the absence of pain. Healing is the changing relationship with pain. It is the gradual shift from being consumed by it to being able to hold it and eventually to being able to learn from it. And the single most powerful catalyst for that shift, in my experience and in the teaching of our faith, is returning to Allah. Not in a performative way, not ticking boxes or going through motions while your heart remains locked in grief, but in a genuine, vulnerable, honest way. Coming to Allah exactly as you are, broken and confused and still loving someone who is not fully loving you back, and saying to Him, I do not know how to navigate this. I do not have the strength to do this on my own. I need you to carry what I cannot carry. I need you to show me what I cannot heal. I need you to heal what I cannot heal. The door of Allah is never closed to this kind of conversation, ever. No matter what you have done, no matter how far you have drifted, no matter how much of yourself you have given to something that was not worthy of it, the door is open. He says in His own words that He forgives all sins, all of them. And the sins against ourselves, the times we betrayed our own worth, the times we chose something painful over the protection He was offering, these too are included in that comprehensive mercy. You do not need to come to Allah having already figured it out. You come to Him in the middle of the figuring out. That is the whole point. Begin with prayer. If you have drifted from your prayers, begin there. Not because Allah needs your prayers, but because you need them. Because the act of prostrating yourself before the Lord of all, placing your forehead on the ground in a gesture of complete surrender, is one of the most powerful psychological and spiritual experiences available to a human being. In that moment of prostration, everything that has been pressing down on you is laid before something infinitely larger and infinitely more capable of bearing it than you are. The weight does not disappear, but you are no longer carrying it alone. And over time, as you return to that posture again and again, the weight genuinely begins to lighten. Speak to Allah about this person specifically, not to ask Him to bring them back to you, not as a first prayer at least, but to ask Him to show you clearly what is right, to ask Him to align your heart with what He has written for you. There is a specific prayer in our tradition for exactly this kind of uncertainty. The prayer of seeking guidance, where you ask Allah to incline your heart toward what is good for you and away from what is harmful. Pray it, mean it, and then watch over the days and weeks that follow how Allah begins to show you things clearly, how your own heart begins to settle into a knowing that was not available to it before. Begin also to rebuild the relationship with yourself that has been neglected. Start small. Start with one thing a day that you do for yourself simply because you deserve it. Not because it is useful or productive, but because you are a soul created by Allah, and souls deserve tending. A walk, a moment of genuine stillness, a call to someone who genuinely loves you and has been wondering where you went. The gradual rediscovery of the things that made you you before this relationship absorbed so much of your attention. These small acts of self-care are not indulgences. They are acts of faithfulness to the trust Allah placed in you when He created you. And understand this about what Allah removes from our lives. When something is taken from us, when a person leaves or a relationship ends or a hope dissolves, our first instinct is often to see this as a failure or a punishment or simply as something terrible. But Allah tells us that He loves His servants more than a mother loves her child. A mother who loves her child does not only give them what they reach for, she sometimes takes things away from them. She sometimes says no. She sometimes allows them to experience a smaller pain to protect them from a larger one. And Allah's wisdom in removing from our lives what we were holding on to with both hands is infinitely greater than any mother's wisdom. What He takes from you, He takes for a reason. And what He gives you instead will, if you open yourself to it, be far greater than what you thought you were losing. I want to take you to a place that is further along the road than where you are standing right now. Not so far that it feels impossible, but far enough that you can begin to see it as real. Imagine yourself months from now, or perhaps a year from now, having done the work, having sat with the pain instead of running from it, having turned toward Allah in the middle of the grief rather than away from Him, having slowly, day by day, rebuilt the relationship with yourself that this experience had begun to erode. Imagine yourself in that future place, waking up in the morning with a quality of peace in your chest that you have not felt in a very long time. Not a perfect peace, not a life without challenge or longing or ordinary human difficulty, but a settled peace, a peace that does not depend on another person's choices or moods or presence, a peace that is rooted in something that cannot be taken from you. And from that place, you look back at this moment right now, reading these words, and you understand it in a way that you cannot quite understand it yet. You see how Allah was working through every part of it. You see how the pain that felt so destructive was actually the instrument of your rebuilding. You see how the loss of that relationship or the transformation of it into something healthier created a space that Allah filled with something better, better for your soul, better for your deen, better for the future version of you that He was always in the process of creating. And you feel from that future place a gratitude that is profound and real and rooted in actual experience rather than in hopeful theology. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told us that the believer's affair is remarkable in its entirety. If something good happens to them, they are grateful, and that is good for them. If something difficult happens to them, they are patient, and that is also good for them. And this applies to no one except the believer. Everything that comes to you through the hands of Allah, even the things that break your heart, has within it the seed of something that will eventually be for your good. Not because pain is good in itself, not because Allah wants you to suffer, but because He is the best of planners. And His plan for you includes this chapter, this painful, disorienting, difficult chapter, as a necessary part of the larger story He is telling with your life. You are not alone in this. That is perhaps the most important thing I want you to carry with you when you leave this message today. You are not alone. Allah is with you. He has been with you through every moment of this. Every tear you shed in private, every night you spent unable to sleep, every moment you smiled at the outside world while your inner world was quietly falling apart, He saw all of it. He has not missed a single second of your suffering. And His mercy toward you is not diminished by the fact that you got here through choices that perhaps wisdom would have redirected. His mercy is not contingent on your perfection. It is offered to you as you are, where you are in this exact moment. We are nearing the end of this message, and I want to speak to something very specific before we close. I want to speak to the part of you that is still not fully convinced. The part that has been listening to everything I have said, has felt the truth of it in 100 small ways, and yet is still holding on to a thread of hope that somehow, some way, things with this person might still change. That this message might not fully apply to your situation because yours is different. Because what you and this person have is real. And maybe with a little more time, a little more patience, a little more of what you have already been giving so generously, it will finally become what you have been hoping for. I want to honor that part of you. I want to honor the love in it and the hope in it and the faithfulness in it. These are not bad qualities. These are beautiful qualities. The capacity to love deeply, to hope, to remain faithful to what you believe in, these are gifts. They are part of what makes you who you are. But I want to ask that part of you to also consider this. What if the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself but for this person as well, is to stop, not to stop caring about them as a human being, not to wish them harm or to close your heart entirely, but to stop giving them access to parts of you that they have not shown themselves able to honor? What if your continued availability, your continued willingness to absorb the inconsistency and still reach back is actually part of what is keeping them from facing what they need to face? What if your letting go is not just your liberation, but in some sense also theirs? One day, and I say this not as a guarantee of any particular timeline, but as a spiritual truth that I have watched play out in life after life. One day you will look back at this season of your life and you will not regret the love you gave. You will not regret the care or the hope or the willingness to believe in someone. What you might regret if you stay too long is the self you lost along the way. The days you spent not fully living because you were too busy waiting. The possibilities you did not pursue because you were too focused on one closed door to see the ones that were opening around you. The connection with Allah that you allowed to thin out while you are busy pursuing a connection that was not fully available to you. Do not let those be the things you look back on. You deserve a love that feels like peace. I want to say that very clearly and very finally. Not a love that sometimes feels like peace in the good moments. A love whose baseline, whose daily reality is peace. A love in whose presence you feel safe to be your full, unedited self. A love that calls out the best in you rather than demanding the erasure of the difficult parts. A love that makes you more, not less. A love that draws you toward Allah rather than pulling you away from Him. A love that looks in some recognizable way like the tranquility He described. You deserve that. It is not too much to ask for. It is not naive to hope for, and it will not find you while you are fully occupied with something that cannot give it to you. So I want to close with this. If this message has spoken to something real inside you today, if it has touched a place in you that you have been keeping quiet for a while, then the discomfort you are feeling is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is becoming right. That the long process of moving from pain to clarity, to healing has been perhaps gently initiated today. Allah does not waste anything. Not your pain, not your confusion, not your grief. He uses all of it. And He is using this moment right now, this message that found you at this particular point in your life for something. Trust that. Lean into it and begin from exactly where you are to turn back toward the one whose love has never required you to be less than yourself to receive it. Comment below. Tell me where you are in this journey. Tell me what you are healing from. Tell me what part of this message reached you. Type "I choose peace" if you are ready to begin choosing yourself. Type "I love Allah" if you want to anchor yourself to the love that never fails. And if this message helped you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because you never know which words might be the exact ones that someone else has been waiting for without knowing it. May Allah heal every heart that reached this message in pain. May He grant you clarity, peace, and a love in your life that reflects His mercy. And may He bring you back to yourself whole and to Him in the most beautiful way. If you are reading this, Allah brought you here for a reason. This message is for every person who loves deeply but keeps feeling pain instead of peace. You have been patient, you have been giving, you have been waiting. But something needs to change today. In this 1 hour spiritual reminder, we talk about why loving someone can hurt so much, why you cannot seem to let go, the damage that is happening inside you that you may not even see, and how turning back to Allah is the beginning of real healing. This is not just a reminder, this is a turning point. Watch until the very end. The last part especially will stay with you. Comment "I love Allah" below to show your support and let the community know you are healing. Share this with someone who needs it. Allah does not waste your pain. Trust His plan.